Hello dear viewers, and welcome back to the ancient dwarven hold of our ancestors. Today we shall be talking about the game Farthest Frontier. Farthest Frontier is a settlement building game designed and published by Crate Entertainment. It was released on the 23rd of October 2025. In Farthest Frontier, you will build a settlement from simple beginnings, starting out with just a wagon, working the land, foraging, creating goods, and constructing building types to serve the needs of your growing population. You will place those buildings, ensure there is enough firewood, set the planting rotations for farms, allocate working locations, all with the aim of having your people survive through the toils of each year. Just a quick note, dear viewers, please consider subscribing to the channel and all that, if you like what I do down here in the ancient hold. You may know Crate Entertainment from their wonderful ARPG, Grim Dawn. I have a video about it here somewhere, which is well worth checking out. So, their prowess perhaps pertains to the isometric action role-playing games, having worked on Titan Quest before Grim Dawn. So I was quite interested when they announced a settlement building game. Really just to see what their take on it would be, starting from scratch as it were, with no history I could see with these sorts of games. I'm very happy to say, dear viewers, that they have done a brilliant job. Farthest Frontier looks very gritty and real, rustic I would say. It isn't stylised perhaps like Pioneers of Pagonia, but it really conveys that grounded visual which I think works very well. It is fully three-dimensional, and you can rotate the camera 360 degrees, but it also reminds me of those fixed perspective 2D affairs from the before times, like the original Stronghold games. I love that sort of thing, and this certainly gives me that same vibe, which is great. As you would hope to see, the villagers, as they live their lives, go about their business in-game, foraging, cutting wood, travelling back and forth, working various industries, and so on. It is very cool to see this all going on. It is something I've always enjoyed seeing in these sorts of games. The buildings themselves are nicely designed to fit in with the rustic feel that the game gives you. Though some buildings can look rather like each other, there is good variety, especially with the later buildings that you can construct. The background music, as the game runs, plays into that rustic feel again. It isn't too in your face and complements proceedings well. There is also that choir of noise, that ambient din that one recalls from having a town filled with life. Hammers and saws and axes and all sorts humming away as you survey your settlement. Great stuff. There isn't a campaign for Farthest Frontier. Indeed, the game is simply one mode, where you start a map and begin building your settlement. The way you give variety to playthroughs is via the settings for when your map is generated. There are 3 presets you can choose from which allow different starting conditions. This ranges from good starting resources to low starting resources, less disease and hard times to rather tough times, along with your settings for raids on your encampment, which involves you incorporating the military options. I can understand the developers wanting players simply to just begin each new game the same way and have those options determine what sort of experience you get, but I think it would have also been nice to have a short tutorial, with the game literally leading you through various aspects of the game, so you understand what is important to get right at the beginning and don't mess up your settlement. There are tutorial windows, which can be very informative, but I do think having at least the basics in a dedicated tutorial would really help to bring people on board. I have played a few settlement/city builders in my time, so I could kind of figure out what's going on, but if this was your first time with something like this, I think you could easily get overwhelmed with all the options and then perhaps just go, bugger this, it's too complicated, and uninstall. There not being any kind of campaign is actually fine, and although I would play it and enjoy it, the game is rather complicated, and it takes a good while to advance through everything. I could imagine campaign missions taking hours and hours, which would feel like a slog. The focus is on the simulation, the creation and running of a settlement, rather than any kind of story campaign stretching over multiple maps. So what do you actually do in the game, dear dwarf? I hear you say. Well, like with other settlement builders, you must raise up your village and its people. You'll start by placing your town centre somewhere on the map. This can be rather important, as there are resources spread around which you should be mindful of. You want your settlement to be fairly near things like forageable food, wood and stone, along with useful resources like clay and plant materials for weaving and so on. Being near water helps, as you can make use of fishermen as a way of quickly and easily getting some food for your population. Once you have your town centre placed, you can start building up your settlement. There are all sorts of different buildings to construct, but at the beginning of the game, most are not yet available. This helps deal with the overload of options you're presented with. Fundamentally, there are things you need to sort out just as you would with other settlement or city builders. You have to have somewhere for your population to live, some source of food, and preferably something to do. You can build shelters for your people, which will house a certain number of them. They are easy to build, requiring only felled wood, so you can quickly get some erected. As for food, there are several options when you first set out. The simplest thing to do is to build forager huts who, once built and manned, which happens automatically by default, will head off in the area you designate and start foraging nuts and berries and such for people to eat. The other easy thing to do is create the aforementioned fishermen. Besides these, there are other ways to create food, such as animal husbandry with cows and chickens and such, as well as growing crops in fields, including wheat, which you can then turn into flour and then bread. Farms have several intricacies to be aware of which can affect which ones you plant. This ranges from soil type, heat, cold, how long they take, and so forth. Again, this can feel a bit complicated, and I don't think I was setting things up optimally, but I got things going and it seemed to work alright. Like many other settlement builders, there are all many types of building that you can construct, covering all sorts of industries. Indeed, in Farthest Frontier there is an awful lot of them. Besides the food production, there are candle makers, soap makers, composters, firewood choppers, markets, traders, mines, blacksmiths, furniture makers, and so forth. As I mentioned earlier, not all of them are available from the get-go, which is a relief, as again it could be a bit overwhelming. Certain buildings require that your town centre buildings be at a certain level, as well as other certain buildings to be built too. So the progression helps to ease you into things. Buildings can also be upgraded, providing extra bonuses or coverage, or, like with the foragers, the ability to have their own garden where they can cultivate a chosen plant. Besides other requirements, some buildings and industries require knowledge to unlock. What is knowledge, dear old dwarf, you say? Well, knowledge is something we seek in order to better ourselves, but with regards to this game, knowledge exists as a talent tree which you can spend knowledge points on to unlock those different building types, along with passive buffs that can increase all sorts of things. It is kind of like a tech tree and a skill tree in one. There are tiers of knowledge which require certain requirements, like points invested in order to progress. You gain knowledge points by default after a certain amount of time each year, but you can gain additional knowledge points from building certain buildings and speeding it up by building the academy. The knowledge tree allows progression to later game industries in a gradual manner, with numerous ways allowing you to build the sort of settlement that you want. For example, you could invest heavily into farming, with lots of wheat farms or animal husbandry. You could go into a militaristic direction, with blacksmiths producing lots of weapons and having a large army ready to fend off raiders. You can of course go for a more general approach with a bit of everything. I do like this sort of thing, as it allows you to specialise your settlement how you see fit, or adding some form of progression to proceedings. Knowledge comes at a decent rate and you can have an effect on how quickly you receive it, which is nice. As alluded to, there are things that can happen to your settlement and its population, which sometimes there isn't much you can do about happening, except preparing for its inevitable occurrence. This takes the forms of maladies, natural happenings, and raiders. Maladies come in different forms, from a myriad of diseases like typhoid, gout, scurvy, to dehydration, frostbite, or general injuries. These have causes like the lack of the right food, lack of proper clothing, and others. It is wise to have a healer so that you can look after anyone who is sick, but it is also good to make sure your population is clothed and has access to a decent diet. Stuff like fires and freak weather is at nature's whim. If you have a good coverage of wells, local people can use them to extinguish a blaze, while providing enough housing, warm clothes and firewood can prevent people from freezing to death. Indeed, you'll have to deal with this every winter, so make sure you have at least everyone housed with firewood. I imagine freak weather could really mess with your settlement, but on a balanced difficulty it seemed dangerous enough not to ignore, but not completely devastating your entire community should you have a bad year. The final thing to think about is raiders. These are bands of soldiers looking to loot and pillage your town. When they attack, you must act quickly, garrisoning people in your town centre, hoping to eventually bring them down while firing from safety or having your own troops to deal with them. As you would expect, to hire troops you'll need to build certain buildings and spend resources to recruit them, namely equipment and gold. If you can get together a decent regiment of soldiers, then you can likely see off most attackers. If you let them run free, they can pinch all your gold and kill some people, which is very displeasing to this old dwarf. As I progressed later, raiding parties became quite large, and sadly my army was outmatched, leading to the destruction of multiple buildings and lots of stuff nicked. So if you play on the medium setting onwards, really make sure to have some decent defences. I mentioned gold there, and I think it is worth having a good chat about. Gold is used for the construction of certain buildings, upkeep for those buildings, paying soldiers, and buying and selling commodities via the trader. Gold is really important, and I do wish this was pressed a bit further when you first start the game. For some reason I assumed you made most of your money from taxing your population, and therefore wondered how I had so little. Well, using the trade system is actually the main way of getting cash. This means you need to produce stuff that you can sell to make that precious gold. Periodically, a trader will arrive in your settlement. When they do, you can go to the trade window and see what goods they are buying and selling. If you have anything they might want and at a decent price, then you can make some good gold. Conversely, if they have something you can't produce yet at least, then you can buy it from them. Animals like cows and chickens and goats can only be obtained this way, so you'll need to purchase some before you can start collecting eggs or milk. There are lots of resources out in the world, but you will always likely be short of something, and you'll need to pay your healer or your soldiers or your rat catchers, so you must have a steady stream of gold. It's a good thing to know early on, otherwise you'll be like me and be broke for a portion of the game until you realised. There are all sorts of cogs and wheels in this game, as you might expect, with different resources, game systems and screens and such, which requires a certain amount of time and mental investment to comprehend. There are repercussions for poor planning, which you must learn and understand from. A lot is going on in Farthest Frontier, so you need to be prepared for that. Once you have a good sense of things though, you can get a settlement running pretty smoothly. I made several mistakes playing this, and it took a while to understand everything. Indeed, there are probably more nuances to systems that I'm not aware of yet, but I must say I enjoyed the experience. And that's the important part. I do think even a brief tutorial might be nice, or incorporating some bits when you first start the game might help to get people over the initial dazzlement of options and settings. As I say, there are some quite detailed help options, so it isn't bereft. I think focus on just the single mode is a good thing. The game is the game and that's it. It will take a good few hours to get to the later building types and knowledge, but they go rather quickly and you can speed things up by increasing the game speed. I really enjoyed this game. I liked the graphical style, the rustic buildings, the interesting interactions between buildings and industries, and I also don't mind doing a bit of fighting against some raiders when I wasn't being overwhelmed. You can easily change these things before you start again, so you can really tailor it to your own needs. This is a great settlement builder, well worth the full price, and I would thoroughly recommend to those who enjoy settlement or city building games. Crate have done another great job here. There we go, dear viewers, another video from me here down in the ancient hold. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching, and I shall see you next time.